Solving irrational equations. An irrational equation is an equation that contains a root. For example, x plus root 5x minus 1 is equal to 5. To solve such an irrational equation, there are 3 steps. Step 1, isolate the square root on one side. So basically get the square root on its own and everything else over the other side of the equals. Step 2, square both sides and solve the resulting equation, because squaring both sides will get rid of the root. Step 3, check each answer in the original equation, remembering that the square root of 4 equals 2 and not plus minus 2. If the equation contains 2 square roots, then it is usually necessary to square both sides a second time before obtaining a quadratic equation from which the roots can be found. And in this case, by roots we mean the roots of the equation, so the x values. So here's an example. Solve the equation root 2x minus 1 plus root x minus 1 is equal to 5 for x values that are an element of the real number set. So we're going to start off by bringing a square root to the right hand side. So this stands for square root and RHS stands for right hand side. So we're going to bring the root x minus 1 over the equal sign and it becomes minus root x minus 1. So we have root 2x minus 1 is equal to 5 minus root x minus 1. Now we're going to square both sides because we have a root on both sides. So it becomes root 2x minus 1 squared equal to 5 minus root x minus 1 squared. So this whole thing needs to be squared. Now on the left hand side, the root and the squared will cancel out and we can just bring down what's underneath the root, which is 2x minus 1. But we need to work this out separately. So 5 minus root x minus 1 squared becomes 5 minus root x minus 1 multiplied by 5 minus root x minus 1. So we bring down the 5, stick on the 5 minus root x minus 1, bring down the minus root x minus 1, and then again stick on the 5 minus root x minus 1. So 5 by 5 is 25. 5 by minus root x minus 1 is minus 5 root x minus 1. Minus root x minus 1 by 5 is minus 5 root x minus 1. And then minus by minus is a plus. And root x minus 1 multiplied by root x minus 1, I'm just going to stick them together for now to show that we're going to multiply them. I'm going to bring down the 25. And minus 5 root x minus 1 minus 5 root x minus 1 is minus 10 root x minus 1. So this is just like saying minus 5x minus 5x is minus 10x. So then working out root x minus 1 multiplied by root x minus 1, we just end up with x minus 1. Because we know that this is one of our rules of roots, that root x by root x gives us x. So if you're multiplying two roots that have the same term underneath the root, you just end up back with that term itself. So root x minus 1 multiplied by root x minus 1 just gives us x minus 1. So then we can take the 25 minus 10 root x minus 1 plus x minus 1 and just write it in here. So this became this. Okay, so we're going to bring down the 2x minus 1. The 25 is going to go over the equal sign and become minus 25. The x is going to go over the equal sign and become minus x. And the minus 1 is going to go over the equal sign and become plus 1. Next we have equals, and then we still have minus 10 root x minus 1 on the right hand side. So we're going to simplify the left hand side. So 2x minus x is x. minus 1 plus 1 will cancel out, and then we bring down the minus 25. And we keep the square root on the right hand side, so we've got minus 10 root x minus 1 still on the right hand side. Now we need to square both sides to get rid of the root. So it's going to be x minus 25 squared, bring down the equals, and minus 10 root x minus 1 squared. So x minus 25 squared is going to be x minus 25 multiplied by x minus 25, bring down the equals. And then minus 10 root x minus 1 squared is going to be minus 10 squared multiplied by root x minus 1 squared. And the root and the squared will cancel each other out, leaving us with x minus 1. So x minus 25 multiplied by x minus 25 is going to give us x squared minus 50x plus 625. Bring down the equals. Minus 10 squared is going to give us 100, and that's going to be multiplied by x minus 1. So we stick on x minus 1 with brackets around it. So we're going to bring down the x squared, the minus 50x, the plus 625, and the equals. 100 by x is 100x, 100 by minus 1 is minus 100. We're going to bring down the x squared, the minus 50x, the plus 625. We're going to bring the 100x over the equal sign, it becomes minus 100x. We're going to bring minus 100 over the equal sign, it becomes plus 100, and that's equal to 0. Next, we're going to simplify. We're going to bring down the x squared. Minus 50x minus 100x is minus 150x. And 625 plus 100 is 725. And that's all equal to 0. Next, we're going to factorize. So we're going to have x minus 5 multiplied by x minus 145. And then we're going to solve. So we're going to say x minus 5 is equal to 0, so x is 5. And x minus 145 is equal to 0, so x is 145. Instead of factorizing, we could have used the quadratic formula or the minus b formula, letting 1 be a, minus 150 be b, and 725 be c. Then we're going to check our answer. So we got x is equal to 5 and x is equal to 145. So if we go back to our original equation, and if we swap the x underneath both roots for 5, we get 2 multiplied by 5, which is 10, and 10 minus 1 is 9. So we get the square root of 9, plus 5 minus 1, which is 4, so we get the square root of 4. And the square root of 9 is 3, the square root of 4 is 2, and 3 plus 2 is 5. So that's true. So x is equal to 5. Next, we can check what x is equal to 145. Well, subbing in 145 in place of the x, we end up getting root 289. And then subbing in 145 in place of this x, we get root 144. And root 289 plus root 144 does not equal to 5. So it's false. So x equal to 145 will not work. So our answer is x is equal to 5.